On the day I heard my son say he prayed for my heart attack, I was fixing a leak under a customer's sink. I didn't confront him. I finished the job, cashed the check, and went home. 2 weeks later, I handed him the business he'd been waiting to inherit. Stripped of every customer, every contract, and every dollar. He got exactly what he wanted, just not how he wanted it. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. The wrench slipped from my hands and crashed to the floor. The sound should have echoed through Mrs. Benedetto's kitchen, but all I could hear was my son's voice coming to the thin office wall. When the old man finally dies, we're firing these losers and selling this dump. I froze under the kitchen sink, 66 years old, and I'd never felt older than in that moment. My fingers were shaking. The same fingers that built Castellano Plumbing from nothing. The same fingers that taught Tony everything he knew about this business. Tony, that's your father you're talking about. Eddie Morrow's voice came from a break room. Eddie had worked for me 20 years. Started as an apprentice when Tony was just a kid. So what? I'm not spending my life fixing toilets like this failure. Failure. The word hit me like a punch to the gut. 40 years of building this business. 40 years of working nights and weekends. All of it was failure to him. Frank's been good to all of us, Eddie said. He built this business from scratch. Look around, Eddie. We're in a shithole office serving shithole customers who argue about every dollar. My college friends are making six figures in tech. And here I am, supposed to inherit Daddy's legacy of unclogging toilets. College. The college I paid for with overtime and emergency calls. The business degree I encourage him to get. This business supports 12 families, Eddie said quietly. Honestly, Eddie, I pray every night he has a heart attack and gets it over with. Then we can liquidate everything, and I can finally start my real life. The word stopped my heart cold. My son was praying for my death, not metaphorically, literally wishing for my heart to stop beating. The kitchen started spinning around me. I pressed my head against the cold pipe above me, trying to stay steady while my world fell apart. Jesus, Tony. Carmen Vasquez's voice now. Carmen had been our office manager for 12 years. That's horrible to say. It's practical, Carmen. The old man's 66. How much longer can he keep crawling under sinks? When he croaks, this whole operation dies unless we're smart. Croaks. Like I was some animal waiting to be put down. I already talked to Sal Torino about buying our customer list. We could get good money for the routes. Sell the equipment, give the crew severance, and walk away clean. Sal Torino, my biggest competitor. Tony had been talking to Sal about selling my life's work. The conversation moved to sports, but I'd heard enough. I lay there in the dark under Mrs. Benedetto's sink, staring at 40-year-old pipes that never leaked. Work I'd done when Tony was in diapers. Slowly, I started backing out from under the sink. My knees scraped against the cabinet floor. But something cold was taking over where the hurt had been. I emerged and stood up carefully. Through the doorway to our office, I could see Tony leaning back in his chair, feet up on the desk, laughing like he'd just told the funniest joke in the world. My son, wishing for my death, so he could sell everything I built. Tony looked up and saw me. For just a second, something flickered across his face. Then he smiled, that charming smile he perfected over the years. Hey, Dad, how's Mrs. B's sink coming along? Almost finished, I said. My voice sounded normal. Like I hadn't just heard my only child pray for my death. Great. I was just telling Eddie and Carmen how lucky we are to have such loyal employees. This business is really something special. I stared at him, really looked at him, and I saw it now. The performance, the act he'd been putting on for years. Yes, I said quietly. It really is something special. Tony's smile got wider. You raised me right, Dad. I'll never take this family legacy for granted. Something died in my eyes as I looked at my son. Something that had been there for 32 years. The unconditional love. The blind faith. I know you won't, son, I said. I know exactly what this business means to you. Tony nodded and turned back to Eddie and Carmen. But I didn't move. I stood there watching him. And for the first time in my life, I saw my son clearly, not the boy I'd raised, not the heir I'd trained, but a stranger who was counting the days until I died. I walked back to finish Mrs. Benedetto's sink, my mind already working, already planning. I finished Mrs. Benedetto's repair in silence. My hands moved automatically, tightening fittings and checking connections. 40 years of muscle memory taking over, while my mind processed what I just learned. When I tested the faucet, clean water flowed perfectly. No drips, no leaks. Professional work that would last for years. The kind of work that built the reputation Tony wanted to sell to Sal Torino. All done, Mrs. B. I called out, packing my tools with the same methodical precision I'd used for 4 decades. She appeared in the kitchen doorway, checkbook in hand. You're a miracle worker, Frank. Same excellent service as always. I took her payment and headed for the door, my legs feeling unsteady. In the office, Tony was still holding court with Eddie and Carmen, probably moving on to his next topic of conversation. Sports, maybe, or the weather. Anything but his father's upcoming funeral. The work truck felt different as I climbed into the driver's seat. Everything looked the same. Tools in their proper places, invoices clipped to the visor, business cards in the door pocket. But something fundamental had changed. This wasn't just Frank Castellano's truck anymore. This was the truck of a man whose son prayed for his death every night. I sat there for a long moment, engine running, staring at the building that housed Castellano Plumbing and Heating. The sign I'd painted myself 20 years ago when business was good enough to afford professional lettering. The windows I cleaned every month because first impressions mattered. The door that dozens of satisfied customers walked through every week. All of it would belong to Sal Torino soon, if Tony had his way. I pulled out of Mrs. Benedetto's driveway and drove through familiar streets of the town where I'd lived my entire adult life. Past the hardware store where I bought my first pipe wrench in 1983. Past the diner where Rosa and I used to take Tony for pancakes after Little League games. Past the church where we'd been married 35 years ago. Everything looked the same, but I was seeing it all through different eyes now. These weren't just the streets of my hometown anymore. They were the streets where my son walked around telling people his father was a failure, where he smiled and shook hands with customers he planned to abandon the day I died. At a red light, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. 66 years old, gray hair, deep lines around my eyes, hands scarred from decades of honest work. I looked like what I was, a man who'd spent his life building something meaningful. But to my son, I just looked like an obstacle. An old man who needed to get out of the way so he could start his real life. The light turned green, and I drove toward home. Tony's car would be in the driveway. He'd probably beat me there, full of stories about what a productive day we'd had, how well he'd handled the customers, how much he was learning from the master. All lies, all performance. But now I knew the truth, and the truth was about to change everything. Tony wanted me gone from his life. Maybe it was time to grant his wish. Tony was waiting in the driveway when I pulled up, leaning against his car with that $1 million smile. The same smile that had gotten him out of trouble his whole life. The same smile that had fooled me for 32 years. Hey, Dad. Perfect timing. I just got back from the supply run. He held up a bag from the hardware store. Picked up those fittings we needed for tomorrow's job. Supply run. Like he was some dedicated employee going above and beyond. Not the son who just finished telling his co-workers he prayed for my death every night. That's good, son. The word son tasted bitter in my mouth now. How did Mrs. B's repair go? Any complications? No complications. Just a simple fix. Unlike the complicated mess my family had become. Tony fell into step beside me as we walked toward the house. She's such a sweet lady. Always asks about you when I see her at the grocery store. Says you're the most honest contractor she's ever worked with. Honest contractor. The man whose son was planning to sell his customer list to a competitor. Mrs. Benedetto has been good to us over the years, I said. Absolutely. That's the kind of customer loyalty that makes this business special. You built something really meaningful here, Dad. I stopped walking and stared at him. The sincerity in his voice was perfect. Oscar-worthy. If I hadn't heard him 20 minutes earlier, I would have been proud of this response. You really think so? Are you kidding? 40 years of satisfied customers. Employees who've been with you for decades. A reputation that spans 3 counties. You should be proud of what you've accomplished. Proud. While he contacted Sal Torino about liquidating everything. We went inside, and Tony immediately started his helpful son routine. Sorted the mail. Asked if I wanted dinner. Offered to look over tomorrow's schedule. The perfect heir, eager to learn every aspect of the family business. You know what I was thinking today? Tony said, settling into the kitchen chair across from me. Maybe we should start documenting some of your techniques. The way you diagnose problems, your approach to difficult repairs. That knowledge shouldn't be lost. Knowledge that shouldn't be lost. So he could include it in the package he sold to Sal Torino. That's an interesting idea. I've been thinking a lot about the future of the business lately. Ways to honor what you've built while moving into the digital age. Website, social media presence, online scheduling. The future of the business. The business he planned to liquidate the day after my funeral. You've given this serious thought. Of course. This is my inheritance. Dad. My responsibility. I want to make you proud. There was again, inheritance. Like my death was just a business transition he was waiting for. My phone rang, saving me from having to respond. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. Castellano Plumbing, this is Frank. Mr. Castellano, this is Jennifer Walsh. I got your number from Mrs. Patterson. She said you do excellent work. I glanced at Tony, who was listening intently, always eager to hear about new customers. New assets to sell to Sal Torino. What can I help you with, Mrs. Walsh? My water heater is making terrible noises. Could you take a look at it tomorrow? Absolutely. What time works best for you? As I scheduled the appointment, Tony pulled out his phone and started taking notes. Customer name, address, time, type of problem. The dedicated son, helping his father manage the business they'd run together someday. Except someday meant the day I died. And together meant until he could sell everything to our competitor. All set. I said, hanging up, new customer tomorrow morning. Excellent. Word of mouth referrals are the best kind of marketing. Tony looked up from his notes. You know what this means, right? What? Mrs. Patterson is out there telling people about the quality of our work. That's the kind of reputation that takes decades to build. Decades to build. Minutes to sell to Sal Torino. Mrs. Patterson has always been happy with our service, I said. And now she's bringing us new business. That's the beauty of what you've created here, Dad. Satisfied customers become ambassadors for the Castellano name. The Castellano name, which would disappear the moment he liquidated everything. Tony spent the next hour going over tomorrow's schedule, discussing equipment needs, even suggesting improvements to our invoicing system. The perfect business partner, invested in every detail of our operation. But I knew the truth now. Every suggestion was just him learning the business, so he could sell it more effectively. Every question about customers was him cataloging assets for Sal Torino. Every display of interest was just research for his liquidation plan. I'm going to bed, I said finally. Long day tomorrow. Get some rest, Dad. I'll handle any emergency calls tonight. Emergency calls. Like the dedicated son who never wanted his father to work too hard. Not the son who prayed for heart attacks and quick deaths. I went to my bedroom and closed the door. Sat on the edge of the bed that Rose and I had shared for 30 years. The bed where she'd made me promise to give Tony everything we'd built together. But Rosa never knew what Tony really thought about everything we'd built. She died believing our son would honor our legacy, not sell it to the highest bidder. I pulled out my phone and did something I'd never done before. I went online and looked up business valuation services, asset liquidation companies, lawyers who specialize in succession planning. If Tony wanted to inherit my business, he was going to get exactly what he asked for, but not the way he expected. Through the bedroom door, I could hear Tony in the kitchen, probably making himself a snack with food I'd paid for in a house I bought while he planned my funeral. Tomorrow, I would start giving him exactly what he wanted. The business would be his. All of it, even the parts he didn't know about yet. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Tony's voice saying he prayed for my heart attack. So at 2 in the morning, I drove to St. Mary's Cemetery. Rosa's headstone was simple. Black granite with gold lettering. Beloved wife and mother. She'd been gone 3 years, but I still came here when the world felt too heavy. He wants me dead, Rosa. I whispered, kneeling beside her grave. Our son wants me dead. The night wind rustled through the oak trees. For a moment, I could almost hear her voice defending Tony like she always did. He's just finding himself, Frank. He'll grow out of it. But he never grew out of it. He just got better at hiding it. You made me promise, I said to the headstone. On your deathbed, you made me promise to give him everything. The memory hit me like a physical blow. Rose in the hospital bed, her hand so thin I was afraid to squeeze it. The cancer had stolen everything except those fierce eyes that made me fall in love with her. Promise me you'll give Tony everything, Frank. The business, the house, everything we built together. He's our legacy. I promise, I'd whispered through my tears. He's going to need you more than ever. Be patient with him. He's not as strong as you think. Not as strong. If only she could see how strong he was now. Strong enough to smile in my face while planning my funeral. Strong enough to fool everyone into thinking he was a perfect son. I sat on the stone bench next to her grave and thought about that promise. 3 years ago, it seemed like the most natural thing in the world. Of course I'd give Tony everything. He was our only child, our pride and joy. But that was before I knew he was counting down the days until my death. I pulled out my phone and called our business accountant. It was 2:30 in the morning, but I left a voicemail. Jim, it's Frank Castellano. I need to meet with you tomorrow about succession planning. Some urgent questions about transferring business assets. Call me back. Then I called our lawyer. Another voicemail. Sarah, it's Frank. I need to discuss some legal matters regarding my business. How quickly can we restructure ownership and liability? It's important. Finally, I called someone I never thought I'd call at this hour. Sal Torino. Frank? Jesus, what time is it? Late. Early. I don't know anymore. We need to talk. About what? About what my son offered to sell you. Long silence. Frank, I don't know what you're talking about. Tony contacted you about buying my customer list. About liquidating my business when I die. Another silence. Longer this time. How did you find out? I heard him talking about it today. How long has this been going on, Sal? Maybe 3 months. He called me out of the blue. Said you were thinking about retiring, and he might want to sell instead of taking over. 3 months. While Tony smiled at me every morning and called me Dad and pretended to care about our family legacy. What did you tell him? I told him to talk to you first. That it wasn't right to go behind his father's back. But he kept calling. Yeah, got more specific about timelines and valuations. Asked what I'd pay for routes and equipment. Routes and equipment. My life's work broken down into dollar amounts. Sal, I won't make you an offer. What kind of offer? The kind where Tony gets exactly what he's asking for, but not the way he expects. I explained my idea. Transfer the real value of the business to Sal legitimately. Customer contracts, equipment, vendor relationships, everything that actually made money. Leave Tony with the shell company and all the debts. That's brilliant, Sal said, and completely legal if structured right. Tony wants to inherit my business. He's going to get it. All of it. What about your employees? They come with the real business. You'll take care of them? Better than your son would have. We talked for another hour, working out details. By the time I hung up, the sun was starting to rise over the cemetery. I looked at Rose's headstone one more time. I'm sorry, sweetheart, but you didn't know what he really was. The drive home took me past Tony's favorite coffee shop. His car was in the parking lot at 6 in the morning. Through the window, I could see him sitting with 2 other guys his age, probably friends from college. I parked across the street and watched. Tony was animated, gesturing with his hands. making his companions laugh. Happy, carefree, like a man without any worries in the world. Like a man whose father was going to die soon and solve all his problems. One of his friends got up to leave, and I saw Tony pull out his phone. He showed the screen to the remaining friend, and they both laughed. Probably another joke about a pathetic old man who crawled under sinks at 66. I started my truck and drove home. Tony's room was empty, his bed unslept in. He'd stayed out all night, probably celebrating something. Maybe he'd gotten an updated quote from Sal Torino. In my bedroom, I opened a safe where Rose's jewelry was stored. Next to her wedding ring was the life insurance policy I'd taken out when Tony was born. $500,000 if I died of natural causes. Tony probably knew about this policy, probably factored it into his calculations. Business liquidation plus life insurance would give him over $1 million when his prayers were finally answered. But there was something Tony didn't know about. Something I had never told him. Hidden behind the life insurance papers was a folder containing documents for a second business I'd incorporated 5 years ago. Castellano Holdings, LLC. Officially, it owned nothing. Unofficially, it held most of our valuable contracts and equipment through carefully structured lease agreements. I'd set it up during Rose's illness, worried about potential medical bankruptcies. Protection for our assets if the worst happened. But Rosa recovered enough to come home, and I'd never activated the structure. Until now. Tony wanted to inherit Castellano Plumbing and Heating. He was going to get exactly that. The name, the office lease, the outstanding debts, the aging equipment that was barely worth scrap value. But the real business, the profitable business, would disappear into Castellano Holdings and then transfer to Sal Torino before Tony even knew it existed. I heard Tony's car in the driveway at 7:30. He came to the front door whistling, probably ready to start another day of his perfect son performance. Morning, Dad. You're up early. Couldn't sleep. Too much on my mind. Anything I can help with? Actually, yes. I've been thinking about what you said yesterday. About succession planning. Tony's face lit up. Really? Really? I think it's time to make some big changes. That's great, Dad. What kind of changes? The kind that will give you everything you've ever wanted. Tony smiled that perfect smile. I'm ready for whatever you have in mind. I smiled back, for the first time in 24 hours. It felt genuine. I know you are, son. I know exactly what you're ready for. The next morning, I did something I never thought I'd do. I shook hands with my biggest competitor in the parking lot of Murphy's Diner. Frank, I still can't believe your son would do this, Sal said, sliding the contract across the table. When he first called me, I thought he was just exploring options. What exactly did he say? That you were getting old, that the business would be more valuable in pieces than as a whole. He had it all figured out: customer lists, equipment values, even employee severance costs. Employee severance. Like firing Eddie and Carmen was just another line item in his business plan. How much did he think it was all worth? $800,000 if we moved fast. Said he wanted to avoid probate delays and estate taxes. $800,000. Tony had put a price tag on my life's work down to the penny. There's something else, Sal continued. He asked about non-compete clauses. Wanted to make sure that if you somehow survived long enough to interfere, you'd be legally prevented from starting over. Non-compete clauses. Tony wasn't just planning to sell my business. He was planning to make sure I could never rebuild it. What did you tell him? That he needed to talk to you first. That sons don't get to make those decisions while their fathers are still alive. But he kept calling. Every few weeks. More eager each time. Last conversation, he said he had a feeling things might change soon. That he might have something definite to offer me before the end of the year. Before the end of the year. Like he had inside information about my life expectancy. I pulled out the contracts I'd spent all morning preparing with my lawyer. Sal, I want to make you a legitimate offer. Not for my death, but for my partnership. Sal read through the documents carefully. His expression changed from confusion to understanding to something approaching admiration. You're transferring everything of value to a partnership between us. customer contracts, equipment leases, vendor relationships, but leaving the debts and overhead with the original company. Tony wants to inherit Castellano Plumbing. He's going to get exactly that. The name, the office lease, the liability for outstanding loans, and equipment that's mortgaged to the hilt. What about your employees? They transfer with the real business. You'll honor their years of service. Eddie and Carmen have been good to me over the years. They'll be treated right. And the customers? They'll get the same quality service they've always received, just under a different name. Sal looked at the financial projections my accountant had prepared. Frank, this is brilliant. You're essentially creating two companies. One with all the assets and profits, one with all the debts and expenses. Tony gets his inheritance, $800,000 worth of debt and depreciated equipment. What do you get out of this? Fair market value for 40 years of work, and the satisfaction of watching my son get exactly what he asked for. We spent 2 hours going over details. Contract transfers, equipment valuations, employee transitions. Everything had to be legally bulletproof. Tony could never prove this was anything other than a legitimate business restructuring. How long do you need to make this happen? Sal asked. 2 weeks. I need to transfer contracts gradually so Tony doesn't get suspicious. What about the timing? When does Tony find out what he's really inheriting? The day I disappear. Where are you going? Somewhere warm. Somewhere far from here. Somewhere I can forget I ever had a son who prayed for my death. Sal nodded. I've got family in Arizona. Good people who could help you get settled. I'd appreciate that. As we prepared to leave, Sal asked the question I'd been dreading. Frank, what happens when Tony realizes what you've done? He's going to come looking for you. Let him look. By the time he figures out the real value of his inheritance, I'll be long gone. That afternoon, I started the process. First call was to our biggest customer, Riverside Apartments. They had a maintenance contract worth $60,000 a year. Mr. Peterson, this is Frank Castellano. I need to discuss transferring your service contract to our new partnership structure. Is there a problem with the current arrangement? No problem at all. Just some business restructuring. Better equipment. Expanded services. You'll get the same crew, same quality work. If Eddie's still handling our accounts, I'm fine with whatever changes you need to make. Eddie would be handling their accounts. Just not for Castellano Plumbing. By the end of the week, I transferred 15 major contracts to the new partnership. Tony noticed customers asking questions about paperwork changes, but I explained it as routine corporate restructuring. Smart thinking, Dad. Keeping up with modern business practices. Modern business practices. Like selling your father's life work to his competitor. The hardest part was watching Tony continue his perfect son act while I dismantled everything he thought he was going to inherit. He helped with the paperwork transfers, made coffee for client meetings, even suggested improvements to the transition process. You know what I like about this restructuring? Tony said one evening as we reviewed contracts. It shows you're thinking strategically about the future, building something that will last. Something that will last. Just not in the way he expected. I want to make sure everything is set up properly, I said. So when the time comes for you to take over, there won't be any surprises. That means a lot to me, Dad. I know this business will be in good hands. Good hands. The same hands that have been planning to sell everything to Sal Torino. 2 weeks later, the transformation was complete. Sal and I own a thriving plumbing business with excellent customers, modern equipment, and experienced employees. Tony was set to inherit a shell company with a prestigious name and enormous debts. Last chance to change your mind, Sal said as we signed the final documents. Once this is done, there's no going back. Tony made his choice when he started praying for my death. Now he gets to live with the consequences. That night, I packed a single suitcase with everything I needed for my new life. Tomorrow, I would disappear from Tony's life forever, just like he'd always wanted. But first, I had one final surprise for my devoted son. I left an envelope on the kitchen table with his name on it. Inside was a complete financial breakdown of his inheritance. Every debt, every liability, every worthless asset he was about to own. along with a note that would change his life forever. You said you prayed every night for me to disappear. Prayer answered. The business is yours now. All of it, exactly as you wanted. Good luck with your new life. You're gonna need it. I walked out of that house for the last time at dawn, while Tony was still asleep upstairs, probably dreaming about his father's funeral. By the time he woke up, I was already 300 miles away, and Tony Castellano was about to discover what it really meant to inherit his father's business. Tony found the envelope at 7:30 in the morning. I was already 4 hours into my drive to Arizona, but I could picture his face as he read the financial breakdown of his inheritance. Castellano Plumbing and Heating. The business he thought was worth $800,000 was actually worth negative $200,000. Office lease, equipment loans, outstanding supplier bills, and insurance liabilities that I carefully structured over the past 2 weeks. My phone started ringing at 8:15. Dad? Dad, where are you? What is this paperwork? There has to be some mistake. I let it go to voicemail. Then I turned off the phone. By 9 o'clock, Tony was at the shop, probably hoping this was all some elaborate misunderstanding. He would have found Eddie and Carmen cleaning out their desks, along with boxes of customer files marked for transfer to Torino Brothers Plumbing. What's going on here? Tony's voice would have been desperate by then. Where's all our equipment? Eddie, bless him, would have been gentle but honest. Tony, your father transferred our contracts to Sal Torino yesterday. We're all moving over to the new company. Same crew, same customers, just different ownership. That's impossible. He can't just sell the business without telling me. He didn't sell it, son. He gave you exactly what you inherited. Castellano Plumbing is still yours. All yours. Carmen would have handed him the keys to the empty office. The lease is paid through next month. After that, the rent's your responsibility. I stopped for gas in Flagstaff and turned my phone back on. 17 missed calls from Tony. 12 voicemails. I listened to them while I filled up the tank. First message. Dad, there's been some kind of mistake with the paperwork. Call me back. Fifth message. Dad, this isn't funny anymore. Where did you put the customer files? 10th message. Dad, please. I don't understand what's happening. Why is everyone saying they work for Sal Torino now? Final message. Dad, I found the note about the praying thing. I was just frustrated. Okay? I didn't mean it. Please call me back. Please. He didn't mean it. Funny how it only became a joke after his inheritance turned into a mountain of debt. I deleted all the messages and turned the phone off again. The drive to Arizona gave me plenty of time to think about what Tony was discovering. He'd probably spent the morning calling customers, only to learn their contract had been transferred. He'd probably gone to the bank, only to discover the business accounts were empty except for outstanding loan payments. Most importantly, he'd probably called Sal Torino to demand an explanation. Sal would have been professional about it. Tony, your father approached me about a legitimate business partnership. Everything was done legally, with proper documentation. You inherit exactly what the paperwork says you inherit. But you were supposed to buy the business from me when he died. That was your plan, not mine. I told you from the beginning to talk to your father first. By afternoon, Tony would have realized the scope of his situation. He owned a business name and a pile of debt. No customers, no equipment, no employees, no revenue stream. Just monthly payments on loans for equipment that now belonged to Sal Torino. My new phone rang as I crossed into Arizona. Sal with an update. Frank, your son showed up at my office this morning. He was upset. I can imagine. He demanded I sell him back the customer contracts. Said he'd pay whatever I wanted. What did you tell him? That the contracts weren't for sale. That his father had been very specific about protecting the customers and employees. How did he take that? Not well. Started making threats about lawsuits, fraud investigations, business interference. I had to ask him to leave. Any of his threats have merit? None. My lawyer reviewed everything twice. It's all completely legal. Aggressive, but legal. That evening, I checked into a small motel outside Phoenix. Clean, quiet, anonymous. The kind of place where a man could disappear and start over. I bought a local newspaper and started looking through the classifieds. Not for plumbing jobs. I was done with that life forever. But there were other opportunities. Property management companies that needed maintenance supervisors. Small contractors looking for experienced foremen. Ways to use 40 years of knowledge without crawling under sinks. My old phone, the one Tony knew, rang constantly throughout the evening. I let every call go to voicemail, then listened to his increasingly desperate messages. Dad, I talked to our lawyer. She says what you did might be illegal. Asset hiding, fraudulent transfer, something called intentional defrauding of heirs. You could go to prison. Empty threats from someone who just discovered that prayers don't always get answered the way you expect. Dad, I called Mom's sister in Florida. She hasn't heard from you. I called Uncle Pete in California. He says if you contact him, he's supposed to tell me. Where are you? Smart boy. Too late, but smart. Dad, please. I know I said some terrible things, but I was just frustrated with my life. I didn't really want you to die. I don't know. I was angry about being stuck in this small town forever. Angry about being stuck with the life I'd built for him. The life thousands of men would have been grateful to inherit. Dad, the bank called about the equipment loans. They want $4,800 by Friday, or they're starting collection procedures. I don't have that kind of money. I don't have any money. Finally, reality was setting in. The last message was different, quieter, more honest than anything I'd heard from Tony in years. Dad, I'm sorry. I'm really, truly sorry. I know you heard what I said about praying for your heart attack, and I understand why you're angry, but I need you to know that I never really wanted you dead. I was just stupid and selfish and took everything for granted. Too little, too late. I went to Mom's grave today, told her what happened, asked her what I should do. I think she'd be disappointed in both of us right now. Maybe she would be, but Rosa never heard her son pray for her husband's death. Rosa never knew that the boy she made me promise to protect was planning to sell everything we'd built together. Dad, if you're listening to this, please come home. We can fix this. We can work something out. I'll do better. I'll be the son you wanted me to be. The son I wanted him to be. For 32 years, all I'd wanted was a son who appreciated what he had been given, who understood the value of honest work and family loyalty, who would honor the legacy his mother and I had built together. Instead, I got a son who saw my life's work as an obstacle to his real dreams. I turned off the old phone for the last time and removed the battery. Tomorrow, I would throw it away and start using only the new number, the one Tony would never find. Outside my motel window, the Arizona desert stretched endlessly under a sky full of stars. Somewhere out there was a new life waiting for a man who'd spent 66 years taking care of other people. It was time to take care of myself for once. Tony had inherited exactly what he'd always wanted, complete independence from his father. No more lectures about responsibility. No more expectations about carrying on the family business. No more interference from the old man who couldn't understand that fixing toilets wasn't a real career. He was finally free to live his real life. Starting with $4,800 he owed to the bank by Friday. 3 days into my new life in Arizona, Sal called with news that made me smile for the first time since leaving home. Frank, you're not going to believe what your son tried to do today. I was sitting on the porch of a small rental house I'd found outside Tucson, watching the sunset paint the desert mountains red and gold. Tell me? He showed up at the Riverside Apartments, our biggest account, told them he was taking back the Castellano plumbing contract, said there had been a misunderstanding and he was the rightful owner of all customer relationships. How did that go? About as well as you'd expect. Mr. Peterson called me to ask what was going on. I explained that we have a legally binding service agreement, and Tony has no authority to modify it. What did Tony do then? Got belligerent. Started yelling about fraud and stolen property. Peterson had to threaten to call security. I could picture it perfectly. Tony in his charming son mode, suddenly switching to entitled brat mode when he didn't get his way. There's more, Sal continued. He went to 3 other major customers today with the same story. None of them bought it. They all called me to confirm that their contracts are secure. Smart customers. Smart? Frank, they're loyal. These people remember when you stayed until midnight fixing their emergency leaks. They remember when you gave them payment plans during tough times. Tony thinks he can just walk in and claim that goodwill because his name is Castellano. But Tony had never built that goodwill. He just assumed he would inherit it along with everything else. How are Eddie and Carmen adjusting to the transition? Better than I expected. Eddie told me yesterday that he'd been worried about Tony taking over. Said the boy never seemed to understand that this business is about relationships, not just pipe repairs. Eddie knew. Probably Carmen, too. They'd seen what I've been blind to for years. Frank, there's something else. Tony hired a lawyer. I figured he would. Guy named Morrison from downtown. Expensive suit, fancy office. Tony's claiming fraudulent asset transfer, breach of fiduciary duty, intentional interference with inheritance rights. Any of it stick? My lawyer says no. Everything we did was legitimate business restructuring. You had every right to reorganize your company's structure before turning it over to your heir, even if it left him with nothing but debt. Especially then. Courts don't guarantee profitable inheritances, just legal ones. That night, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. Dad. Tony's voice sounded different. Strained. Desperate. How did you get this number? I hired a private investigator. Dad, we need to talk. We are talking. No, I mean face to face. I'm flying to Arizona tomorrow. The audacity was breathtaking. You don't have money to pay your equipment loans, but you can afford plane tickets to Arizona? I borrowed money from Marcus. Dad, please, just give me 5 minutes to explain. Explain what? That you didn't really mean it when you prayed for my death? That it was just frustration? Long silence. Then, yes, that's exactly what I want to explain. Save your money, Tony. Stay home and figure out how to pay your bills. Dad, I can't pay the bills. The business you left me is worthless. I'm going to lose everything. You're going to lose exactly what you thought my life's work was worth. Nothing. That's not fair. Fair. After 32 years of providing for him, after working 60-hour weeks while he planned my funeral, he wanted to talk about fair. You know what wasn't fair, Tony? Hearing my only child tell his friends that the best gift he could get would be his father's heart attack. I was angry. I was frustrated with my life. So you decided to blame me for it. I never blamed you for her. You called me a failure, Tony. You said I was pathetic. You told your friends you couldn't wait for me to die, so you could sell everything I'd built. Another long silence. When he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. I know what I said, and I hate myself for it. Not as much as I hate knowing that's what my son really thinks of me. Dad, please. I'm begging you. I'll do anything to make this right. There's nothing to make right. You got exactly what you wanted. Independence from your failure of a father. A chance to live your real life without anyone holding you back. I don't want independence. I want my family back. Family. The word would have meant something 3 days ago. Now it just sounded like manipulation. Your family is gone, Tony. Your father died the day you prayed for his heart attack. I hung up and turned off the phone. The next morning, I drove into Tucson and bought a new phone with a different number. Then I stopped at a bank and opened an account under my middle name. Frank Anthony Castellano became Anthony Frank Castillo with one simple form. That afternoon, Sal called my old number one last time. Frank, your son showed up at our shop today. Made quite a scene. What kind of scene? Demanded to see the contracts you transferred. Accused me of bribing you to steal his inheritance. Eddie had to physically escort him out. How's Eddie handling all this? Better than you'd think. Told me he's relieved not to be working for Tony. Said he'd been dreading the day you retired and left him with your son as a boss. Everyone had seen it except me. The writing on the wall that I'd ignored for years. Frank, there's something else. Tony's been calling our customers directly, try and convince them to break their contracts with us and sign with him instead. Any takers? None. But he's getting desperate, offering services at below cost, making promises he can't keep. It's getting ugly. Ugly was what happened when entitled people finally face consequences for their actions. Sal, I need to ask you a favor. Name it. If Tony contacts you again, record the conversation. I have a feeling we're going to need documentation of his behavior. Already ahead of you, my lawyer suggested the same thing. That evening, I sat on my porch and watched the sunset again. Same mountains, same colors, but everything felt different. Lighter somehow. Like I'd been carrying a weight for 32 years and finally put it down. My old phone rang one more time. A voicemail from Tony, his voice raw with tears. Dad, I know you won't answer, but I need to say this. I went to Mom's grave again today. Told her I destroyed our family because I was too stupid and selfish to appreciate what I had. I told her I'm sorry for breaking the promise you made to her. I'm sorry for wasting everything you and she built together. A pause. Heavy breathing. I know you'll never forgive me. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But I want you to know that losing you is worse than losing the business. Worse than the debt. Worse than anything. Another pause. I love you, Dad. I know it's too late to matter, but I love you, and I'm sorry. I listened to the message twice, then deleted it. Love was easy to claim when you'd lost everything else. But where was that love when Tony was planning my funeral? Where was it when he was calling me a failure? Where was it when he was selling my customers to Sal Torino? Love wasn't words spoken in desperation. Love was actions taken when nobody was watching. Tony had shown me his real feelings when he thought I couldn't hear them. Now, he could live with the consequences of that honesty for the rest of his life. 2 weeks after I disappeared, Sal called with news that made everything worthwhile. Frank, it's over. Tony's filing for bankruptcy. I was in my new workshop, a small garage behind my rental house where I'd been restoring old furniture. Honest work with my hands. But nobody's life depended on it. No emergency calls at midnight. No ungrateful heirs counting down days until my funeral. How bad is it? Bad. The bank foreclosed on the shop yesterday. Equipment loans, building lease, supplier bills, everything you structured is coming due at once. What about Tony? Saw him at the coffee shop this morning. Looks like he hasn't slept in weeks. Lost weight. His car got repossessed Tuesday. I should have felt satisfaction. This was exactly what I planned. But instead, I felt something unexpected. Not regret exactly, but hollow emptiness where satisfaction should have been. There's more, Sal continued. He's been telling people around town that you embezzle money from the business, that you're hiding assets offshore. Anyone believe him? Frank, these people knew you for 40 years. They remember when you fixed their plumbing for free during the recession. They remember when you hired their kids as summer help. Nobody's buying Tony's victim story. Good. My reputation would survive even if my relationship with my son hadn't. What's he doing for money? Working at the hardware store. Part-time minimum wage. Lives in a studio apartment above the pizza place. Tony Castellano, who used to mock customers for haggling over prices, was now living paycheck to paycheck in a town where everyone knew his story. Sal, I need to ask you something, and I want an honest answer. Shoot. Do you think I went too far? Long pause. Frank, you want to know what I really think? Yes. I think you did exactly what any father would do after hearing his son pray for his death. Maybe you went further than most, but you're also a more methodical man than most. Methodical. That was one way to put it. But nothing. Your son made his choice when he decided to treat your life's work like a lottery ticket he was waiting to cash in. That evening, I did something I hadn't done since leaving home. I called directory assistance and got the number for St. Mary's Cemetery. This is Frank Castellano. I need to arrange for fresh flowers on my wife's grave. Rosa Castellano, Section C. Of course, Mr. Castellano. What type of arrangement would you like? Her favorites. White roses and baby's breath. Every week. We can certainly arrange that. Should we put your name on the card? I thought about it. Tony probably visited Rosa's grave regularly, looking for signs that I'd been there, evidence that his father was still somewhere in the world, still caring about the family they'd once been. No name. Just right, always remembered. Very good, sir. After I hung up, I sat in my small living room and thought about the promise I'd made to Rosa. Give Tony everything. Take care of him no matter what. I had kept that promise, just not in the way she'd expected. Tony had everything now. The business name, the legal responsibility, the debt, the consequences of his choices. All of it. My new phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. Anthony Castillo? The fake name I'd been using felt strange on my tongue. Dad? Dad, is that you? Tony. Somehow he'd found my new number. How did you get this? I hired another investigator. Dad, please don't hang up. I have something to tell you. I'm not interested in. I'm getting married. The word stopped me cold. What? Her name is Sarah. She's a teacher at the elementary school. We've been dating for 8 months. 8 months. While Tony was planning my funeral and counting inheritance money, he'd been building a relationship with someone who had no idea what kind of man she was marrying. Congratulations, I said, the word tasting bitter. Dad, she doesn't know. About what I said. About what I did to you. She thinks you and I had some kind of business disagreement and you moved away. Smart girl. Please, Dad. I know I don't deserve it, but will you come to the wedding? No. She wants to meet you. She's heard so many stories about the man who built Castellano Plumbing from nothing. She thinks you're some kind of hero. Hero. If only she knew her future husband had prayed for that hero's death every night. What stories did you tell her, Tony? The truth. About how you worked 3 jobs when I was little. About how you taught me everything about plumbing. About how you sacrificed everything to give me opportunities you never had. The truth. Interesting how Tony's version of truth had evolved since his inheritance turned into bankruptcy. Did you tell her about praying for my heart attack? Long silence. No. Did you tell her about planning to sell my business to Sal Torino? Dad. Did you tell her about calling me a failure while I worked myself to exhaustion providing for you? Dad, please. Then you didn't tell her the truth, Tony. You told her a story about the father you wish you'd had. You were that father. You were exactly that father. I was just too stupid to see it. Too stupid. Or too entitled. Or too busy counting the days until my funeral to notice what he was throwing away. Sarah sounds like a good woman. I said, don't ruin her life the way you ruined ours. I won't. Dad, I swear to you I've changed. Losing everything. Losing you. It made me understand what really matters. What really matters. Funny how that clarity always came after the consequences, never before. I have to go, Tony. Dad, wait. Can I give you my address? In case you change your mind about the wedding? I won't change my mind. In case you want to send a card or something. Sarah would love that. Sarah would love a card from a grandfather, figure she'd never actually meet. The hero from the stories Tony told when he needed to feel better about himself. Goodbye, Tony. Dad. I hung up and immediately called the phone company to change my number again. But as I sat in my quiet living room that night, I thought about what Tony had said. He was getting married, starting a family, maybe becoming the kind of man his mother had hoped he would be. Maybe, or maybe he was just better at hiding his true nature from someone who hadn't had 32 years to see through his performances. Either way, it wasn't my problem anymore. I'd kept my promise to Rosa. I'd given Tony everything. The business, the responsibility, the consequences, the chance to grow up and become a man worthy of the Castellano name. Whether he took that chance or wasted it like he'd wasted, everything else was up to him now. But he'd have to do it without his father's help. Some bridges, once burned, could never be rebuilt, even when both sides finally understood what they'd lost in the fire. 6 months after Tony's wedding call, I was rebuilding a 1940s kitchen table when my neighbor knocked on my workshop door. Anthony, there's a young man here looking for you. Says he's your son. My blood ran cold. After 3 phone number changes and a new identity, Tony had found me again. I opened the front door to find him standing on my porch, thinner than I remembered, wearing a cheap suit that had seen better days. Next to him stood a pretty brunette woman with kind eyes and a nervous smile. "Hello, Dad." I looked at the woman. "You must be Sarah." "Mr. Castellano, I'm so sorry to intrude like this. Tony said you two had a falling out, but I never imagined." "How did you find me?" Tony shifted uncomfortably. "I never stopped looking. Hired investigators with money I couldn't afford. Followed every lead. It took 6 months, but I finally traced the flower orders to Rose's grave back to a credit card under your new name. Smart. Expensive, but smart. What do you want?" Sarah stepped forward. "Mr. Castellano, I want to meet the man who raised such a devoted son. Tony talks about you constantly, about everything you taught him, everything you sacrificed for him." I almost laughed. Devoted son. If only she knew. "We brought pictures from the wedding," Sarah continued, pulling out her phone. "I know it probably hurt that you couldn't be there, but I chose not to be there." Sarah's face fell. She looked between Tony and me, clearly confused by the coldness in my voice. "Dad," Tony said quietly, "can we talk privately for a minute? Anything you want to say, you can say in front of your wife. Please, just 5 minutes." Against my better judgment, I stepped onto the porch and closed the door behind me. "You look good, Dad. Arizona agrees with you. Cut the small talk, Tony. What do you want?" "I want to apologize. Not the desperate apology of a man trying to get his inheritance back. A real apology from a son who finally understands what he destroyed. You've apologized before. This is different. I've been going to therapy. Dad, working through why I was so angry, so entitled. Why I took everything you gave me for granted. Therapy, the solution every guilty person discovered after facing consequences. And what did you learn? That I was terrified of becoming you." The honesty in his voice caught me off guard. I was terrified of spending my life in this small town, crawling under sinks, working 60-hour weeks for customers who treated me like the help. I was terrified of being ordinary. I was never ordinary, Tony. I know that now. God, Dad, I know that now. You built something meaningful. You supported a family. You earned respect through decades of honest work. But I was too immature to see any of that. So you decided I was a failure instead. I decided you were everything I didn't want to become. And instead of being grateful for the foundation you gave me to build something different, I resented you for it. I looked through the window at Sarah, who was examining the furniture I'd been restoring. Good work. Careful craftsmanship. The kind of attention to detail I'd learned in 40 years of plumbing. What's your point, Tony? My point is that I lost the best father a man could have because I was too proud and stupid to appreciate him. And now my wife is pregnant. And I'm going to be a father myself. And I'm terrified that I don't know how to be the kind of man you were. Pregnant. Sarah was pregnant with my grandchild. Congratulations. Dad, I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking you to come back to my life. I know I burned that bridge beyond repair. Then what are you asking? I'm asking you to help me be a better father than I was son. The request hung in the desert air between us. My grandchild would grow up without knowing me, but maybe they could grow up with a father who'd learn from his mistakes. How? Letters, advice, wisdom from a man who raised a son through 32 years of challenges. I know I don't deserve your guidance, but maybe my child does. I thought about Rosa, about the promise I'd made to give Tony everything. Maybe this was a final part of that promise. Not money or business assets, but the wisdom to break the cycle of entitlement and ingratitude. One letter. I said finally, when the baby is born. After that, we'll see. Tony's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, Dad. Thank you. But understand something, Tony. This isn't reconciliation. This isn't forgiveness. This is me helping my grandchild have a better father than I had a son. I understand. Sarah appeared in the doorway, her face bright with hope. Is everything okay? Everything's fine, Tony said, wiping his eyes. Dad's going to write us a letter when the baby comes. Sarah looked confused but smiled anyway. That would be wonderful. They left an hour later, Sarah chattering about the beautiful Arizona landscape, and Tony unusually quiet. As their rental car disappeared down the desert road, I went back to my workshop and picked up my tools. That night, I started writing the letter I would send when my grandchild was born. Not to Tony, but to a baby who deserved better than the legacy of broken promises and betrayed trust that had defined our family. Dear grandchild, I began, your father once made a terrible mistake. He confused the gift of family with the burden of obligation. He mistook love for control and generosity for weakness. By the time he understood the difference, it was too late to save our relationship, but it's not too late to save yours. I wrote for 3 hours, pouring 40 years of parenting lessons onto paper. The mistakes I'd made, the things I'd learned, the wisdom I wished I'd had when Tony was young. Your father is not a bad man. I wrote, he's a man who learned important lessons the hard way. Make sure he teaches you those lessons early, so you don't have to learn them through loss like he did. When I finished, I sealed the letter in an envelope and put it in my desk drawer. Someday, when Tony called to tell me about his child's birth, I would mail it, but that would be the extent of my involvement in their lives. I'd given Tony everything I had to give. My business, my wisdom, my final chance at redemption. Whether he used those gifts wisely was up to him now. I walked onto my porch and looked up at the Arizona stars. Somewhere out there, Rosa was probably watching, wondering if I kept my promise to give our son everything. I had. Even the hardest lesson of all, that actions have consequences, and some consequences last forever. Tony had a wife now and soon a child. A chance to build the kind of family that honored the sacrifices previous generations had made for them. But he'd have to build it without his father. Some gifts come with a price. And sometimes, the price of wisdom is the loss of everything you thought you wanted. Tony had received both. Whether he understood the true value of what he'd gained and lost was something I'd never know. And maybe that uncertainty was a final lesson I had to offer. In the distance, a coyote howled at the moon, and I went inside to start another day in a life where nobody prayed for my death. It was enough. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your opinions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on one of the boxes showing on your screen. Thank you for watching.